In this lesson, we're going to focus on publishing the Predictions web service. In the last couple of lessons, we've looked at the JSP script, the backend Java beans that make up that web service. But now we're going to get to the practical matter of how do we put the service together in such a way that it can be published and made available to clients. Basically, we need two things. The first is a web server. Java has various options. Tomcat and Jetty are probably still the most popular. They're both lightweight but production ready. Each of them can handle either websites or web services. We're interested, of course, in the web service part. The second tool is technically optional, but publishing a website or a web service tends to be tedious, and it's nice to have a tool that automates that. In this case, I'm going to use Ant, although Maven is another perfectly fine tool that can be used. So in this lesson, the emphasis is going to be on Tomcat. In the next lesson, we'll look at Ant. So let me turn to the Tomcat overview. We're now looking at a second working file. This is called tomcat.txt. The first file, by the way, was just called tools.txt. So this is a very quick overview of Tomcat. Let me just say for the record, you see the URL on the screen in front of you. You can install Tomcat in various ways. I prefer downloading the zip file and unpacking it. You can install Tomcat wherever you like in your local system. It doesn't matter. For reference, I'm going to use the term Tomcat Home to designate that install directory. And I'll show you where I've installed it on my Mac momentarily. Now I have a little bit of background. You can look at that at your leisure. The really important part for us is here in the middle, this little depiction. So you see Tomcat Home, and then underneath I've drawn two subdirectories that are of particular interest to us. The first is the bin subdirectory. That contains startup and shutdown scripts for both Unix type and Windows systems. So basically you run startup to start Tomcat and shutdown to shut it down. Normally, when I have it on, for example, one of my desktop machines, I have it running indefinitely. The only time I ever restart it is when I reboot the machine. The second subdirectory of interest is web apps. It's got various subdirectories, and the short version is this. The way you publish a website or a web service to Tomcat is you drop a jar file into the web apps directory or one of its subdirectories. It's as simple as that. If you want to unpublish something, you remove that jar file. If you want to update the thing, you overlay the jar file with a new copy. It's really very nice. You certainly don't have to stop Tomcat in order to redeploy or do anything like that. So what I'm now going to do is move to the command line so I can flesh some of these ideas out. So I'm opening up a terminal window on a Mac. This is actually a bash shell. So on my system, immediately under my home directory, I've put Tomcat 8. You might want to put it someplace else, but again, for emphasis, it doesn't really matter. Wherever you would like to install Tomcat, whatever name you would like to give it is just fine. So let me show you the directory structure. So again, I can highlight it maybe to make it slightly more visible. There's the bin subdirectory. Here's the web apps subdirectory. Let's just look at web apps for the moment, and then I'll come back to bin momentarily. Right now in web apps, you don't see any jar files. You basically see subdirectories, including something called examples. Tomcat comes with a bunch of sample websites already. We're not going to bother to look at those right now. Instead, I want to start Tomcat, confirm that it started, and then give you a brief overview of the other subdirectories under Tomcat. So to that end, again, here's where I am. I'm in Tomcat Home, and I'm going to do bin startup.sh. If you were on Windows, it would be startup.bat. So the old bat file. You'll get a little echo confirming basically that you have started. On the screen, you see this Catalina this and Catalina that. So let me just clarify. This is also in the working file Tomcat technically is the name of the web server. Catalina is the name of the so-called servlet container, which is the most important component of the web server. Now, in order to confirm that Tomcat is running, I could use curl, but it's a little nicer to open up a browser, point it to localhost 8080. I'll refresh just for confirmation. And as Tomcat tells you, if you can see this screen, then you have successfully installed and started Tomcat. So basically, right now, we are up and running. We could, at this point, deploy the predictions web service, and we'll do that shortly. Now, let me come back to my terminal and clear the screen for readability and just give you a very brief tour of the other subdirectories. So bin we've just seen. Bin you use to start up Tomcat and, if needed, shut it down. Web apps over here is where we're going to put our websites and web services. More of that later. Logs. Logs contains an enormous amount of logging information by date, by source. The file you see over here to the left, Catalina out, is basically the catch-all. It's got everything in there. The only thing you have to remember about the logs directory is that occasionally you need to clean that thing out. So there are many nice utilities that will back that up for you if you like. Let me clear again, just to give you the sense. There's a subdirectory called conf. Here's the very good news. In Tomcat, the main configuration file is called server.xml. Mostly you can leave that alone. Where you might touch that, for example, is that if you wanted to enable HTTPS. And we'll talk about that when we do security. Out of the box, Tomcat supports HTTP connections, but not HTTPS connections. So bin, conf, logs, web apps are the main ones. The lib subdirectory that you see right here contains libraries. Normally speaking, you're just going to take what's in there and not add to it, but that's a fine point that we can revisit a bit later. For now, our main interest is bin. We need to get Tomcat up and running. And web apps, that's going to be the target for our websites and, for us in particular, web services.